Long time no see.
Long time no see. It's been a while. How are you, brother?
I'm cool, man. Just living and learning and everything in between. You know what I mean?
Right. I guess that's kind of all we can do, especially these days, right?
Yeah, man. That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
So the spirit of this podcast is storytelling. So I will start with a bit of a personal story. I
Sure.
didn't drink most of my life. I didn't drink from the time I was like 16 until I was 36. I'm 40 now. Kind of started drinking in the last 4 years, and growing up, I was kind of obsessed with this show called Cheers. I'm sure most of you have heard of it, right? And
Yep.
I always loved that dynamic of, like, the regulars at the bar and the cool atmosphere of the bar and that kind of thing. But, not drinking, I never had much use for bars. I would go there with my bands when my bands would play shows there. If like some buddies wanted to go out, I'd go out and I'd be like the DD so I could get free pop and free coffee all night, but wouldn't drink, and
Hmm.
in the last few years. So I'm working down the street, and then they opened this whiskey bar between me and my workplace, which shout out to Black Jack Barbecue here in Toronto.
Hmm.
And I loved the place. The bartenders were all awesome people. The owners were great people. The decor was nice. Everything about it. I'm a bourbon drinker, so whiskey bar was kind of my thing. It's a barbecue joint and carnivore, so all worked out for me, right? So I kind of started going there on the regular basis, and it became kind of my cheers. I knew most of the people who would come in on a regular basis. I knew all the bartenders, that kind of thing. So that leads into meeting you. It's one of those things where I used to hang out in coffee shops a lot to get to know new people, and it's definitely artistic people. Like you typically find them sitting around in coffee shops writing and
Hmm.
jabbing and whatnot, right? So
Hmm.
moving on to the bar scene, the same type of thing. You kind of want to identify, like, that dude looks like he's got some stories, so that's how I met you, and happy to know you. We haven't hung out a lot, so this is kind of my opportunity to get to hang out with you a bit and get
Yeah,
to know you a
man.
little bit more.
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks for. I mean, I've seen that you've started this, and it's cool. It's a cool thing, and I was touched that you wanted to reach out, and you like, I found you interesting. I was like, well, I'm not all that interesting, but I'm passionate about a few things, and we can talk about some of those things for sure. And the beauty about sort of having that sort of bar culture in neighborhoods is the cool thing of meeting people that you might not meet all the time, but there's a place everyone can congregate. A lot of these bars and different things have things going on. This was pre-COVID, so there was open mics and comedy, and people would come to support everybody. So, and then you get to meet the characters who were around, and you were one of them. So yeah, I remember it very well. So, but thanks for having me, to make a long story short.
No problem, brother. Yeah, I've been following you on Instagram since we met, and I've noticed you've got your own podcast, which we can talk about at some point for sure. But
Sure.
what really kind of interested me the most about you, and I would love to hear more about, is the poetry you do. Like, I've always loved slam poetry, spoken word, that kind of thing. Poetry is a big part of my life. I'm a lyricist.
Mhm.
I'm a songwriter, storyteller, all of the above. So lyrics, poetry, kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, I guess to start that off, I guess, growing up, I was raised by my great grandparents. My mom was there until I was about 6, but during those 6 years she was there, she taught me a lot about the things she was into. She was into costume design and stuff like that, and into movies. So obviously she kind of gravitated towards the arts, and we'd always play music all the time, and so music just became this thing, this entertainment. I guess when I was younger, I used to, you know relatives would give me little instruments, and I would perform whatever, mimicking the words of these songs that I learned to listen and get to know artists through her. And extending through that, just the love of music was always there. And then hip hop came along, and that kind of, I got my first album. I think it was Christmas time. It was like 1979. I think it was the Sugar Hill Gang versus the Furious Five on a Showdown, it was called, on Sugar Hill Records. And I listened to this thing and I was like, what the heck is this? Like, I was immediately drawn to it and I could never, ever get it out of my head. And then, over the years going into the 80s, hip hop started to become a bigger thing. And then all this culture came with it, like breakdancing and graffiti and everything. And it would all just came to me. And I felt like, oh, this is what I'm really, really into. I mean, I love music as a whole. It wasn't always hip hop, but anyway, yeah, I embraced the culture. And then of course I used to perform at parties and stuff. Like, I was a break dancer and I would start rapping or I'd sing and stuff like that. And then when I got to high school, I kind of went internal a lot. I did a lot of acid for one thing. So, and I used to skip school and go across, I grew up in Halifax. I'd go across on the ferry to the library in Dartmouth, and they had this cool like library, and I'd go down in the basement and I'd read all these different things, and I would start to write. I'd start to write how I felt, and of course, a big thing from that was, my mother leaving when I was young. So there was a lot of I kind of went through this. My great grandparents were great. They put a roof over my head and loved me and everything. But I felt like I was missing something. And so I started to write these feelings that I had about different situations and everything like that. And then I got into more hip hop and De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising. That album kind of changed my life, and I was like, wow, because it was so funny, and they were just putting their own spin to what hip hop I knew, like Run DMC, Eric B. and Rakim, like sort of all the New York stuff. De La is from New York, but they're from Long Island, and they're kind of a bunch of geeks and nerds and stuff. So they put their spin on it, and that opened up the golden era of hip hop. And of course, De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, the Jungle Brothers, Black Sheep, the Native Tongues, that became my branch of hip hop, sort of this sort of cool, conscious Afrocentricity kind of stuff. But they were just speaking from the heart, and it wasn't the usual stuff. I didn't grow up in the streets, so I wasn't rapping about that. I started to rap about how I felt or things that I seen. And then, over the years, when I moved to Toronto, I was in a band, and I sort of brought my poetry to that, and was highly influenced by spoken word, Saul Williams. But I wanted to put that hip hop spin on it in a flow kind of way. So I sort of started calling it spoken flow rather than spoken word. And I guess to make a long story short is that is my essence of really who I am. It's a way that I really connect, and it's a way that I can really express how I feel inside. And I don't think I don't think I'd be much without it. Discovering that now, like, you know what I mean? It's just that outlet. That's something that you can put your all into. There's no judgment. Sometimes I don't share it, but I feel it. I feel what I put down on the page, and that's why it's become a big passion of mine. And then I do miss performing with the band and doing stuff like that, especially during COVID. I started to write a lot more after taking a break, and then even before that, I was putting stuff on Instagram, and I just started to want to share it a little bit more, and it's kind of made me rediscover the love that I had for it in the first place. But art, it ebbs and flows, and sometimes you got nothing to say at all, and then sometimes you got a whole bunch of say, and then holy motherfucker, the floodgates open, right? And I don't mean to swear, I hope, but
you're welcome to. Please
cool.
do.
Yeah. But anyway, that's pretty much it. It just means a lot to me, and I'm influenced by a lot of that stuff, and it's a good way to express myself with the state of the world and with my own sort of inner kind of thoughts or issues, or I don't want to say demons or whatever. We all have a little bit of something, and we all need a way to get it out rather than keep it suppressed. Because once you start to suppress stuff, and we all have, and we all do, and I'm still learning to let things go, um, you know, if you suppress things, it just becomes a bigger problem, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And so I call a story like that, like I look at a lot of artistic people, especially musicians, that backstory I call like the superhuman or the superhero origin story, and obviously, like, if you follow any superhero, there's usually whatever cause that is typically some type of traumatic event, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like those of us who've been through that kind of life struggle tend to gravitate a lot more towards art. And obviously, our parental figures while we're growing up are hugely fundamental in terms of our development, right? So a lack thereof, or maybe some that come and go, like I've encountered that. Obviously you have, that does play a part in our expression of art and who we or more or less our reason for wanting to express art in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, luckily, I had my great grandparents, and they were wonderful. And that was, being raised by my great grandparents was totally, it wasn't the norm. I mean, it was for a lot of Black families, believe it or not, but not in the neighborhood I grew up in. And so that was great. And my father wasn't really involved in the picture either. But that being said, we've all kind of healed our wounds through that. And, we've become close again, both my mother and father. But during those years of our time apart, I discovered how much of them was in me, and I didn't know it. I can acknowledge it now. Like, my father's a drummer. And so there was always that, I often rhyme within a rhythm in my spoken flow. So I kind of get that from him, and I knew that anyway. I saw him sporadically growing up, but, it wasn't like he was like, oh, you should do this. It just kind of innately came. And my great grandparents, they weren't really into that sort of thing. So I kind of just grew up just trying to find where I fit in or what made me feel a certain way. And, music was definitely one of them. And now I can say, coming full circle in my life and my age now, I can look at the beauty of the trajectory of the story, no matter how painful it was at times, and no matter how painful life can continue to be for us all, to have that foundation of something you can go to, whether you trade stock, wash dishes, or read books, something that you can put your time into to escape and use your imagination, or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely. A similar thing to relate to. I was raised by a stepdad, and my biological father I didn't really get to know until I was about 13. I had problems in school, and one of the ways that they solved those problems was by putting me in like choirs and musicals and like drama class and stuff like that, because I like to sing, I like to perform. So they would kind of push me towards that. And I always thought it was weird because like my mother wasn't musical and her family's not all that musical. And I'm like, where is this coming from most of my life? And then when I did get to know my father, I found out that he was a singer, and that he actually, like, when he sang, he sounded just like Elvis. Like, he had a very, very similar type of voice. And so when I was 13, he gave me this tape that was him singing basically over top of recorded tracks, right? Like, this is before karaoke and before the technology to take vocals out of tracks. So it was just, him singing along with these songs. And I remember listening to that and just being like, oh, okay, this is where it comes from, and this is like part of my drive to do this. And definitely part of my talent has come from this figure that I didn't know. And that little bit of self-discovery, probably for you too, triggered a lot.
Yeah, it often does. Like I said, the floodgates open sometimes, and as you get older, you start to reflect a little bit more. And I think you tend to sort of, want to accomplish things in the sense of just putting your heart and soul into something without reward, without money, or without whatever we think may come behind something. It's just important to have those sort of moments of self-discovery. Yeah, I agree.
What's Halifax like? I've never been out that way.
Oh, it's amazing. It was a good place to grow up. It's It's small compared to Toronto. It has a huge Black history because it was sort of the end of the Underground Railroad. Has a per capita population per capita. It has the largest Black population in Canada. And and it was also the place of Africville, which was a community that was where the families, Black families, own their own land and everything like that. And then systematically, unfortunately, the government pulled it away from them. And a community that was thriving on its own, the government started to cut off their utilities, and it became rat infested and everything like that. And then they said they were going to relocate people, and people got paid not much for their land, and relocate them to public housing in the north end of Halifax. I didn't grow up there, but the church I went to, that my great grandfather, he was the head deacon of Cornwallis Street Baptist Church. So I kind of led two lives in a way in Halifax, because I grew up in a mostly white neighborhood where there were two Black families, and then on the weekends I'd go into church, and which was a big Black community in the North End, Godkin Street area. And then I would go to my father's grandparents and spend the day there, and sort of all the friends that were there were predominantly Black. And so there was a duality. But Halifax is still a cool place. Everyone's chill, everyone's kind, friendly. It's the Maritimes, where you walking out on the street and you could get invited into someone's kitchen party, we like to call them, and just chilling like you were family. So I mean, there was a lot of that there. I have nothing but fond memories, and I do go back every year. I try to, and still have some family there and stuff like that, and some good friends as well. So I mean, it's a place who made me who I am today.
Very nice.
Yeah.
You have a podcast,
yes,
which I believe is called Down Home, Nova Scotia. Is
That's
that right?
right. Yeah, yeah. It's called Down Home. Down Home is sort of the slang word for the people who are up here, the expats. They're like, "Oh, have you been down home much?" And we know exactly what that means. So yeah, and that was. It started during the flashpoint of the sort of what we like to call, Derek and I, who's the co-host of the podcast, the racial reckoning of 2020 with the whole George Floyd thing. I mean, those problems existed well before that, but in the pandemic and everyone locked down, not as many distractions, it became a lot more prevalent in our minds, where everyone was like really looking at it going, what the heck? And just for the simple fact that it was just brutality, you know what I mean? And then we decided we had conversations about that in Derek's backyard. He's an excellent barbecue guy, so I'm always spending time there. And then we just sort of started having these conversations, and some of our friends and family, they were like, you guys should do a podcast about it. And then it just kind of went deeper in us looking at how we grew up in the community that we grew up in, and the pride, the passion, and to look at that. And and no one really has these conversations, not even with like Derek and I. We're both Black. We didn't really have these conversations a lot. And I had a lot of friends in Nova Scotia growing up, a lot of white friends and stuff like that, but we didn't have these conversations because we didn't look at it like that. And then when Derek and I started talking about it, we started looking back and noticed some things about Canada, and sort of like the racial undertones that people can have sometimes, and we started looking at situations of how we grew up, and we just sort of wanted to start having conversations about what it was like to be a person of color growing up in Canada, because everything sometimes we relate racism to the way that it's shown in the US media and everything like that, right? So there's an attachment to that. Everyone gets riled up about that, and as you should, but no one really gets riled up about what's going on maybe right here in our own backyard.
Oh, for sure. You're definitely not the first Black man I've had on this podcast. I've got a lot of Black colored friends. Like I don't see the world that way. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know your age. I'm 40, but like,
I'm 49, so
okay, so we've about a 10-year gap, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
even within that 10 years, like growing up for me, not to say that racism didn't exist, because clearly it fucking does, you know,
Oh yeah.
but it's not like my friends were never racist people, you know what I mean? Like
I know
kids
what
my
you mean.
age were never racists. Like I remember going to high school, and my my public school was like all white kids, right? So we go to high school, and there was like a friend of mine in my homeroom, and in my homeroom had a black guy in it, like a black guy, right? Like
Yeah.
that says something
Right.
about a lot of different things. So my
Yeah.
homeroom had a black guy, and everybody was pointing out this black guy. And I remember even at that moment being like, I don't understand. And my buddy who went to the same or finished at the same public school as I did was like, well, dude, we don't see enough of it. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like he's small town Ontario, small town Canada, you know, you don't really see a lot of it, right? And
Yeah.
like even my kids, when I moved to Toronto, which was when I was 30, so it was only about 10 years ago, bringing them down here, that was kind of like their first experience of like black, brown,
Multicultural. Yeah.
multicultural, like everywhere they looked, right? And they were,
Yeah.
and I remember it kind of throwing them off too, where they were like, why are people racist? Like, I don't understand this. Like, all I see are humans. Like, I'm not really looking at skin tones here, right? And
Yeah.
so, and I mean, that's a positive thing, but unfortunately, you know, a lot of the people who are in control of our society right now, in terms of corporations, banks, lawmakers, are the generation closer to your generation than even my own, right?
Mm-hmm,
So they
mm-hmm.
do still have a lot of that in place. And then, of course, the way it gets blown out in society is absolutely atrocious. And the
Mm-hmm.
George Floyd riots definitely showed that, where
Mm-hmm.
it was like, you know, racism exists, and we need to deal with that. But
Yeah.
then we had the media more or less firing off both sides, so that like that unity that should have come through that whole experience actually turned into the opposite, where it caused a lot more polarization. Like I hear a lot of people going like, oh, you know, he was a meth addict, he was this, he was a criminal, he was that. I'm like, he's a human being
Mm-hmm.
who should not be treated like that,
Mm-hmm.
regardless
Mm-hmm.
of whether or not any of those things happen, and definitely irrespective of his fucking skin color.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, well, I mean, it's kind of sad. I mean, racism does definitely exist. And it's ensconced in law. It's ensconced in the way kids actually get taught, because it was often taught to be the norm. I'm not going to go into a long history lesson, but the simple fact is the way sort of people of color, especially blacks, especially in the days of slavery, the way they were treated as savages, and they did everything. They were the economy of the United States of America. They were the labor workers for that, and they were treated as property. So there's that right from the jump. Blacks were treated as property. They were treated like animals. So that has never really left the world. Of course, we're educated, and we can look at, and we can say, I'm not racist. It's not about whether or not you're racist. It's just about what we've seen as the norm to be. And the fact that there's such a divide. There's a cultural divide in different things. Like today, for instance, there was the big trial with Kyle Ridenhauser,
Bridenhouse, I think.
yeah, Rittenhauser. And you know um I'm not going to get into that in the sense of, but the fact that he killed two people and he got off scot-free, and it just, there's just this, and it's not the way I'm going to say this. We live in a world of white supremacy, and not white supremacy in the way of Nazi or anything like that. It's just, it needs to be redefined, because often the status quo and the people in power are often, the white population, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's all white people, but I'm just saying the ones who built the laws, made the laws, the forefathers, whatever the case may be, the people with the money and the power, they owned slaves, they took land from the indigenous people. They're the ones in power. And then they made laws to make it so. And then, people of color and indigenous got put off into different places and their identity was stripped away. And the only way they can be identified is the way, unfortunately, is these stereotypes that have blown into proportion and will always be connected to that. And the only hope we have is just to teach generations coming up. It's always about the kids, hopefully they can see where we go wrong. It's about learning from our mistakes. It's just like how we learn from our own mistakes from people or things in our lives. And we go, okay, that happened. And I'm going to try not to do that. I got to learn from that, or whatever the case may be. But sometimes life goes in cycles and it just continues, vicious cycles. Somehow we got to break the chain, and somehow, we got to break this way of thinking that everybody is separate. And when we're not, I mean, we're separate in the sense of the way of what the status quo was built off of. And there's some things that we may not recover from until these laws get changed. They abolished slavery, but they didn't abolish the laws. And so, that's where the problem lies as far as I see it. And I could go a little bit deeper, but I'm not going to. But it's just that the fact there is a divide, and there will always be a divide, whether we choose to see it or not. It's ingrained,
Well, I mean, there definitely is one. I hope that there won't always be one, but like I agree with you. As of right now, it definitely seems like there always will be one. And like the Kyle Rittenhouse thing is a good example. Just before this podcast, even, I was kind of going through Instagram, and I saw a good friend of mine put a thing up comparing, the fact that this white guy just killed 2 people and got off of it scot-free, which, and I'll be honest right now, I don't believe he should have gone to prison, but that's irrelevant to my point. My point being that there are many, 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 many Black people in this world who do way, 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 way less and go to jail for a far, 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 far longer time, or go to jail simply because their fucking skin color, right? Yeah, and even me saying like racism for me wasn't a thing when I was growing up. That's easy for me to say. I'm a fucking white guy, right? So it's easy for me to say.
I know what you're saying.
And then it's really easy to point at this and go, okay, irrespective of whether he's guilty or not, if he was Black, he'd be guilty. And I think we all kind of need to admit that.
He would have been dead. Yeah. He would have been dead. Yeah. He would have got shot. It wouldn't even made to trial. If he was seen roaming the streets with a gun, he would have gotten killed.
Yeah.
Hands down.
And what do you think about this? If he had have killed a Black guy, do you think he would have been found innocent?
Probably, probably. I mean, he got found in as well. It's also the gun laws in America and the different things, and the fact he was underage as well, too, even to have a firearm. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's just, it just sometimes puts a microscope on the divide in that regard. Like, if something happens to a Black person who does something like this, they'd either be dead or gone to jail, for life or whatever. And then there's a difference. Like, he still did commit murder. I don't know. And he traveled a distance to get to where he was carrying a firearm. So to me, that shows like kind of premeditation, but I don't know too much about it. It's just that the system is kind of screwed. But as far as a Black person, if that was a Black person, he most likely would have been shot, so there you go.
Yeah, I even see it even in the rhetoric from this thing. Like, I mean, I haven't followed it all that closely to see what everyone kind of said along the line or along the way, so to speak. But it's like right now, a lot of the posts I'm seeing are actually correcting the fact that he killed white people over the fact that he killed Black people. And I think that like our problem is kind of summed up in that like why are we still in a place as humanity where we see that as a factor? I think that like the fact that that is a factor should tell us a lot about where we are at as a society and what we need to work on. We need to get ourselves to a place where that's not a factor. I would love to see a world where we're like, Joe killed Bob, right? And Joe is either guilty or not guilty of killing Bob without having to add in, you know, Bob was black or not, right?
Right.
But unfortunately, as much as I would love to see society go that way, it almost feels like we're going the opposite way with like the woke society these days, because I mean, through like say like the LGBTQ community, all this pronoun stuff, everything else, it almost seems like instead of moving to a place where we are kind of all one and segregation is not a thing, it almost seems like we've chosen segregation, but it's segregation on our own terms.
Right.
Meaning if I segregate myself into this group, that's okay. But if you segregate me into that group, it's not.
Yeah. Unfortunately, lately, we seem to live in a world of categories, which makes it even kind of worse in a way, you know, because there's so many, you're here, you're there, you know, who's what. And then, you know, that causes a divide because within those categories, we're all trying to stand up for what our category is, you know what I mean? And then, you know, I don't know. Everyone wants to be seen, and social media has a big play in that. And, you know, I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought there. I apologize. But there's just so much going on. And the only way we can, you know, sort of remedy kind of anything is having conversations about how we really feel. You know what I mean? How each individual feels about things, or even to bring up conversations that we have to have uncomfortable conversations about how people feel, how they see. The other person needs to be seen, and the other person needs to be heard, and we all need to see each other in the way that we want to be living in this world, because we all say, oh, we're all one world and we're all this and we're all that. We want that, you know, we do, but we don't really talk about the things that are going on unless they're blowing up on social media and everyone just hops onto the trend train and whatever. And half the people don't even know what they're commenting on. You know what I mean? It just becomes this overwhelming thing. And then there's the other side of it too. I mean, there's lots of positive things too. Don't get me wrong. I use social media just like everybody else. And, I try to put some poetry up or be funny or whatever, or music that I'm listening to, just so people can be inspired by those things. But, it also has its negative things, and sometimes the negative things outweigh the positive things. There's a group on Facebook that was complaining about, unfortunately, someone was stealing parcels from their porches and whatever. And then one person got on there and just said, look at what this guy did, blah, 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 and use some derogatory stuff and everything like that. And then people start piping on and, why are you judging him for stealing and blah, blah, blah. And I weighed in on it once and I was like, why? And then everyone just started fighting each other. And I was like, what? This is so stupid. This is where the problem lies. And so you're supposed to come together as a community, but now I don't want to be friends with you if you're going to be saying this or that. So I just said, not that I'm a voice of reason or anything, but I just said, the fact that there's guys going around stealing whatever, that should be it. Watch yourself. People need to take precautions. Maybe, I don't know, but there's a guy going around the area is stealing stuff. That's crappy, because people work hard to order the stuff they order, whatever the case may be. And I just said, it sucks that this person does that, but what sucks even more is that your sense of community is all of a sudden ravaged because you guys are hating on each other. I was like, the problem isn't us, each other. The problem is the act. You know what I mean? Whether regardless of who the guy is, or he's, if he homeless or this or that, like, we're so quick to just jump on everything and then end up causing this debate over, which is filled with hate. and we're so used to it, no one even realizes it. And then a lot of people in that particular post, they were like, oh, yeah. And then a few days later, the post was taken down. So it was funny. That's the downside of it. And then everyone just hops on this train, and it often, everyone's personal opinion comes out. Everyone's allowed to have their opinion, but you don't have to say your opinion on such a public forum where you're going to give people a chance to retaliate. And then, hate comes out, and it's usually hate that we just came out of this crazy pandemic. And, there's a lot of feelings going around for people. I've had my battles, I've had my anger issues and my angry moments, but I totally did not choose to take it on anyone, no matter who I am or what I've gone throughout my whole life. There have been times I've been bitter, and, I'm working on resentment and all those issues and stuff that make me angry, but I'm not going to direct it or project it to everyone else. And that's the problem. Things get projected, Ooh, sorry about that. I just got really worked up.
No worries.
Yeah.
No worries. Like, and like, you're right. Like, we want this, but yet we're kind of moving in the opposite direction, because we're replacing racism with tribalism, right? Where everybody's kind of picking sides. Like, and this, just going forward in here, my kind of rules for this podcast, we don't talk about the affliction going around. We call it the joy. You can get the joy, you can catch the joy,
okay, fair enough.
The joy.
Fair enough.
The solution, one solution being a lollipop, and then there's other people who are sugar free, and just makes it a little bit more fun. Yeah, but I mean, even that, like this division between people who have taken the lollipop and those who prefer to remain sugar-free is being blown up in such a way that is no different than racism, right? It's segregation. And like, let's bring this all back to the root of what it actually is. Like, what's the difference between what Hitler did with Jews and what whites have done with blacks, or what we're doing right now amongst ourselves between sugar-free and lollipops, right? There's kind of no need for that. But like, this wokeism, social justice is all pushing us towards all these tribes, all these like categories, like you said before, which is kind of, instead of solving the problem that we're all seemingly on board to try and solve, seems to actually be blowing it up even more. Mm-hmm. And I think that the joy or COVID has kind of driven that home, that like, even within that, which side of the fence you sit on with that particular thing, it's one side against the other, and it shouldn't be that way. You and I should be able to have a conversation where, and I mean, you and I have both done it within this conversation, where we have to hold ourselves back because we don't want to offend people. Right. Maybe we don't want to offend each other. And then for that record, you can't defend me, brother. Even if we, even if we disagree on shit, I love you. You're a beautiful human.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean,
people don't see it that way.
Yeah. I mean, you also have to have emotional maturity to have a regular conversation, and a heart to heart, even if it's a difference of opinion for anyone, you should be able to do it in a civil way. You know what I mean? And that's really what it's all about. And and like I said, the the joy, I guess you call it, right? It put a microscope on everything because of everything that came along with it, the lockdowns and this and that, and less distractions. And, people were sometimes forced to look at themselves, and, you're home a lot. You're not able to see your friends or whatever the case may be. We weren't able to. Connection is really what the world is about. And the more we are connected with each other and we can find a common connection, then there'd be less fighting. You know what I mean? Like you and I meeting at a bar and just chit chatting, enjoying what's going on, whether it's music or ribs or, whatever the case may be, or bourbon, those are the things, because in those tender moments, we see that we're not different at all. And I my friends are my friends, and people I have conversations with, we're people having conversations. We're all human beings. We're just living and learning and discussing and talking. So emotional maturity plays a lot into it, but a lot of people are angry, and rightfully so, for a lot of different reasons. But you also have to learn to channel it and not project it upon each other. And that's where the problem lies. And then, it comes with such force because of where it comes from and what it may be attached to because of everything that we're seeing, whether it's racial conflict or, homelessness or anti-vaxxers or, whatever, it's all these things. They all lend into it. And then sometimes it brings out the worst in us sometimes. And, yeah.
Yeah. I think of, I almost said this earlier, just about like, knowing that you didn't unfollow me during all of, because I've been kind of outspoken about my own feelings about what's going on with the Joy and lollipop versus sugar free. And I'm not, and a lot of people like see my posts or see my stance on it and think that I'm like judging the other side. I'm totally not. Like, if you were to actually have a conversation with me, you'd see how much compassion, understanding, and empathy I have for the opposite side from what I'm sitting on. But I think we both need to come to the middle and really take an objective look at this sometimes, and see where we can agree that, like, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now, but like the response to it is what I'm standing up about. It's not about your personal choice. If anything, me standing up for my own personal choice is also standing up for your personal choice, right? Like, all I really want is the personal choice there. And I'm going to ask you this question when I'm done, but my own personal experience with it was, at first it was kind of like a nice slow down reset. It really kind of gave me some personal time to kind of look at myself, look at life. I happened to be going through a employment transition at that exact time anyways. So it gave me that. It gave me a little bit more time to focus on health, which was my immediate response to all of this, was like, oh, there's a fucking virus out there that might kill me. Well, then I need to focus on my health. Not the health of other people, my own health. So, and then like also like, the mortality issue of a pandemic like this makes you also think about your relationships with other people, right? So it gave us, an incentive, or at least it should have, to maybe reach out to some family members we hadn't been reaching out to, maybe mend some bridges that we might have had with some friends or family that, were mendable. And there was kind of two options there. You could go that way. Or you could fall into the depression, the fear, the negative vibration of it all, and allow it to consume you. And, for good or for bad, I think that it kind of forced us down that path of, kind of taking a look at ourselves.
Of course, man. I'd like to put a spin on the Joy, and it has nothing to do with the joy that you're talking about, but sort of an acronym, joy being the journey of yourself, and
I like that.
And I can say that's sort of the journey that I took during this. I was having some health issues as well that kind of I knew about, but then, and I didn't know how I quite felt about them. And, I leaned on some bad habits for a bit to sort of mourn it. Like, I'm a very sensitive person, and, I feel things very deeply, sometimes too deeply, but that's me, like, wholeheartedly. And, I go down those rabbit holes a lot myself. And, I chose to look at things in that way as well. But I kind of wanted to take the journey of myself. I wanted to find what brought me joy again, amidst all the madness that I was going through. And I really did kind of take a look out of myself. I had some things going on prior to that affected sort of my view on mortality and brought up some old, childhood wounds. And I chose to sort of look at my inner child, so to speak. And I was like, oh man, I forgot about you, dude. I'm sorry. And he had a lot to say, so, and it came through the written page. I honestly can say I wrote every day, whether it was a verse or whether it was an idea. I got into walking a lot, walking every morning and sort of slowing down, like you say. And it was a reset, and we needed that. I don't care, because we're always distracted. We're always on the go. And no one took time. No one takes time to really feel themselves. And unfortunately, some people, I have some good friends that were going through some of their own challenges, and it was hard. but I also believe that if you go through a depression, hopefully you can find your way out. And I believe, to heal, you got to be able to feel, right? And if you don't acknowledge the presence of those things, whether they're depressive or negative or angry or whatever, it's all emotion. It's all viable to the joy that you're trying to find, whether putting, finding peace within those things or just examining those things, just becoming more self-aware of what you got going on inside. Sometimes we're so busy with other things and filling voids with other things that we forget about that inner child and what that may feel like to them. And it's usually this thing that you've been holding on and suppressing to for so long, that all it takes is someone, pulling that trigger and, being triggered by someone they don't even know. And then it comes out. And then what do? You attach that trigger, the way you feel, to that person, maybe. And, and it has nothing to do with them whatsoever. And then, the whole thing is, for me, was just getting back to the things that I enjoy and looking at some of those raw scars that were still there. And, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Like, because I believe, vulnerability is power. If you can't be vulnerable, you ain't feeling shit. You know what I mean? You're not, because to be vulnerable, to be raw, that's war. And to win, you got to fight it. And to win, you got to find out what I need. Man, I'm full of acronyms today. So, but yeah, to find you want to win joy, what I need for the journey of yourself. There you go. We'll call it that.
Yeah, it seems a lot of people are more focused on feeling good than actually dealing with what's making them feel like shit.
Yeah.
Whether it's our lifestyle choices, whether it's our diet, whether it's what we're holding on to in terms of emotional baggage or psychological baggage, everyone seems to be looking for kind of a quick fix. And unfortunately, if you've ever broken a bone, you'll know that like there is no quick fix for healing. You really have to go through the process. You have to put in the time. You have to keep up the discipline of the practice of like not walking on your broken leg, and allowing it time to heal. And I think that especially with the way that our society goes with all these quick fixes and like instant gratification and everything else, we've kind of lost that ability to be patient.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot going on. But yeah, you just got to take time and just be good to yourself, really. It's start there. And then, if we start from there, maybe we can go somewhere else,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I noticed you got a notebook in front of you.
Yeah.
Which tells me that you followed my little telepathic hope for this conversation.
Right.
And you would be willing to read us a little something.
Sure.
Give us a little bit of that spoken flow.
All right. Just going to turn the light on here. Have a little drink. This is called Pandemic of a Blackened Heart. It's sort of kind of what I felt, and doing our podcast too. We've been looking at these sort of conversations, having these conversations of racial trauma, racial injustice and different things like that. And, I can't help but be inspired by it. And, Derek and I always say we wanted to talk about it. We wanted to use our voice to bring up these uncomfortable conversations and everyone to have their say. And it's not about reckoning of going, oh, we deserve this because of this happened. It's about speaking about pride, but it's also just speaking about there's justice and then there's injustice, and there's so many different layers, and racism is big, but the biggest thing that I've taken from it was the systemic racism that I'd never really examined before in some of the conversations that we were having with people. And it was just like, holy man, it really, really runs deep, and because they made laws of different things, it just carried on to have justification to hate because people were different color, you know what I mean? And built off that imagery that was already portrayed. and divide. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. But this is called
Yeah.
Pandemic of a Blackened Heart, and it's sort of based off some of those themes. So, and also my personal journey within it. This is a love manifesto. I ran out of gas though. I stopped for a little peace until I could refill my soul's petrol. It was a bit of a quest, though, going back in time to a time of retro, active in the attic, mind acrobatics, flipping out, tucking in, beginning again, what I need to win, maybe a loving friend forever to the end, a perfect blend that can mend a sometimes broken-hearted garden. But still I bloom from the shadows of the cave, mastering self so I am no longer a slave. Thoughts of Rumi, a love for lust, an invisible child on the cusp, sipping from a cup that has now runneth over, seeping into the roots deep until I learned how to get over. Sometimes I get dizzy, a song for the horn, a melody for the truth in tune with the dawn of an early morn. Well, that's when I rise to seize the day and find hope in the strength of those that paved the way, who walked alone through an April storm so that flowers would bloom in May. Mother, may I please pledge allegiance to them. Arose from concrete, black on both sides, most definitely, in fields of endless days, swallowing in their pride while freedom passed in the bluest of the skies, running in the night not to be seen, through the underground toward a tunnel of light to still have a dream. Kings and queens free from shadows in the valley of death. If we take a knee, does that mean we have to take our last breath? It's 8:46. There's a pain in my neck. There are secrets still buried deep beneath the depths. Excuse me, mister. Why not just push us? We're slow close to the edge. We've conformed to your norm, and still our lives don't seem to matter, while some walk with privilege on the rung and won't even let us touch the ladder. Metaphorically speaking, we are still lynched and hung because of the view of a hue. So tell us, man, what the fuck are we supposed to do with so much hate, food for thought taught, and we continue to eat everything on the plate? I say we scrape it clean like a new canvas by doing better to still have a dream. Paint a new picture, something sore eyes have never seen. You know what I mean? Because I know what I mean. It was a tough, it was tough for 2 years in isolation. And it's still just as hard being in lockdown for over 400 years of mass incarceration, trauma passed down to each generation. I guess we just got to hold on strong, wading in waters, singing Negro spirituals for our rights not to feel wronged. A call to arms free from chains of sorrow. We can't let yesterday still become our tomorrow. Wait, before you shoot, I still have to ask, are we still a threat now that we all have to wear the same masks? Thank
Beautiful,
you.
brother. Thank you.
Thanks.
That was very badass. And yeah,
Thanks.
you know, at this point in time, you know, our current, and maybe this will be the thing, you know, like as negative as what I'm about to say fucking is, maybe it will be the thing that makes us fucking see this. But like right now, this discrimination that's happening in society has got nothing to do with skin color. It's got everything to do with personal choice, right? It's almost like an evolution of what was wrong with the first version of segregation that we had, which was the fact that it just seems like we refuse to view each other as human.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, we gotta have these uncomfortable conversations even to bring it up as a topic, because you know, a lot of things just get pushed under the rug, and you know, we just live and try to survive, and some of the things at the root never really get looked at down there. And you know, and if we don't look at the roots, then you know what's going to happen to the fruit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, we really got to take a look at who we are, what we stand for, what we believe in, and what the system is actually doing to us. I don't know what we can do to change it, but the thing that we can do is talk about it and have these conversations and have it as a regular thing. And like, let's start looking at the things that are hard to look at, like, you know, in schools. Let's teach the histories that don't get taught. Let everyone see their part in it, so we can all go, oh, you know, the indigenous people in the residential schools, like, you know, everything gets hidden. in Nova Scotia, there was a colored home for the Nova Scotian colored home for Black children. Lots of things went on there, abuse and trauma and everything like that. And these stories don't get told. So if they don't get told, how are we supposed to know? How are we supposed to feel? And if we don't feel it, how can we heal it? And if so that's it's looking at these things. It's looking at these things. That is from the root, from the root to the fruit. What we end up bearing, well, that's up to us. It depends on what kind of trees we plant. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny because you naturally segued there into like kind of what my next question would be, because we just had all of this information come out about the indigenous schools and everything. And I mean, like, that's, first of all, that's been a conspiracy theory for a long time, which now is no longer a conspiracy theory. Second of all, it's been something that we've been kind of sweeping under the rug for, like close to 200 years of Canadian history as well. And this is where my thought was going was, Canadians kind of have this idea that we're above all the shit that went on in the US in terms of slavery and everything else. And obviously this information about the residential schools has kind of thrown a wrench in a lot of people's belief systems about Canada as a country. Mm-hmm. And so I was wondering if you would be willing to speak a little bit about, the history we had before that with Black people, because a lot of Canadians like to think that somehow Canadians aren't racist and never have been, and we don't have history of slavery, we don't have history of racism like the United States does. But I personally know that is absolutely fucking not true. In fact, going back to the beginning of our country, we were probably a little bit worse. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, I mean, just in the sense, the simple fact, yes, Canada was sort of the end of the Underground Railroad, specifically Nova Scotia was the end of the Underground Railroad. And, the people who escaped here, when they escaped here, they still weren't free. And when they did get here, this is the way I see it. When they did get here, they were promised things, and then they were given, they were put in areas where that wasn't, farmable and different things like that. They were given the shitty parts of the land, and that's a telltale sign right there. It was just systematically put in place. And then when they did finally, like I said, speaking on Africville, when they did get their own land and their own community, that was taken from them. And, that has always been the case. And then you just like, indigenous people, you put them in reservations. With Blacks, they put them in public housing, not had to, suffered economically, racially, in every way, shape, or form. It didn't disappear. And even when I was growing up, I grew up in, an all white neighborhood, two Black families, the Joneses and the Marsmans. And, I was, growing up in the 70s, I didn't really experience it like some of my family members did, but I still experienced it. But what I learned was, it was just something that was taught. The kids that I grew up with, some of them weren't the kindest, and I had to learn to fight early. I had to take beatings and everything. I had to fight back, and it was just sort of the defense of me. But to them, I was something else, which I didn't understand. And then, and that's what happened. Is just all of this racism it just gets taught and carried from generation to generation. And in Canada is no different. It's just no different. And then because we were already viewed a certain way, and people have a hard time getting rid of stereotypes and perpetuating them, you know what I mean? So, and things always get perpetuated, and then things get put in categories and everything like that. And but Canada has its history as well. I'm just trying to think how I can go deep into it, but the fact that it exists is really just enough. And hopefully, Canada is a wonderful country, no question. But, like I said, there's always that veneer beneath what's below the surface. You can see the iceberg coming, as always. It's not the tip of the iceberg that damages you. It's what lurks below. So I hope we can dive deep and change those ways of thought, and just change the way people of color are viewed. You know what I mean? And get rid of some of this quote unquote white supremacy that wants to maintain the status quo and not give up the power. And they'll do whatever they can to keep it. Social media sometimes can be a blessing for them because it distracts us from what's going on and engages some of the negative aspects of this kind of sometimes high school culture, this nitpicky thing that we'll end up paying attention to. You know yourself how easily it is to get caught up in drama. You know what I mean? I got caught up in it myself a lot of times. I have to learn to check myself. But that being said, yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought, but Canada definitely has its racism. And the only thing we can do is, like I said, the whole time is just have these conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like, being able to, and that's part of why I started this podcast, was to have these conversations. Like, even if it does get a little bit difficult or a bit touchy at times, I like that. I kind of feed on that. Like, if it was you and I sitting in a bar and we started disagreeing, that would make me want to talk to you more than less. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, a lot of people kind of take the opposite view of that. But yeah. So in general, I think our society, or our world, I shouldn't even say society, because I think it's even bigger than that. I think our planet is going through a bit of a transition. I keep calling it, I feel like we're going through the next stage of evolution. And technology is a big factor in all of that. Mm-hmm. And even in terms of everything we've discussed today, like all of the topics, we have this thing coming called the Metaverse, which is basically, like, if any of you have seen the movie Ready Player One, it gives you a view of the Metaverse. And just to, like, this plays into a bit of predictive programming, if you will. But if you watch that movie, I think the movie takes place in sometime around like 2040 or beyond. But they say in that movie that the first version of the Oasis, which is the multiverse within Ready Player One, came online in 2024. Which is exactly when we are currently ready to launch the Metaverse, right? And most people have recently realized that, like, Facebook is changing their name to Meta. That's because of this Metaverse that is coming. There's a lot of CGI companies, like everyone's familiar with the Lord of the Rings movie. Peter Jackson founded a company for CGI for the making of those movies, and he called it Weta. They changed their name to Unity, and Unity is one of the founders of this Metaverse that is coming. So basically what this is this virtual reality world that, all these tech companies and the corporations and everything that kind of, if you will, control our world, are putting a lot of money. They've put billions and billions of dollars behind this project in order to create this Metaverse. Now, within the Metaverse, you don't have to be Jay, and I don't have to be Shane. We get to pick our own name. You don't have to be black. I don't have to be white. You don't have to be male. I don't have to be male. We can choose all of those parameters for us. And I mean, that sounds fun. That sounds great. On the other side, we also have, all these issues in humanity right now being brought through by liberals and left-wingers and combated by right-wingers, and all the division in between, which is causing, this long list of pronouns, this long list of how we introduce each other. I'm a he, him, white male wearing a black shirt, like all of that nonsense that we're starting to see. Yeah. And all of that is about to be put on steroids, quite literally, with the creation of what we are calling the Metaverse. Now, that could go one of two ways. That could end the idea of segregation, racism, things like that, because like we kind of all are on an equal standing within that Metaverse. But in a way, I'm kind of seeing it as, like we were talking about earlier, like adding more categories to it.
Yeah.
and kind of separating ourselves further.
Mhm.
I've always been, a supporter of people being individuals and, believing in what they believe in and supporting their own ideals, their own thoughts, their own feelings. But somewhere along the line, it seems like that movement, like whether you want to go punk movement or rebel movement or whatever, that divergent movement has actually, the divergence has become the norm.
Mhm.
So it's like, I don't know the way that this is going to play out. Is this going to end things like racism as the main example, or will this make it worse? What
Hmm.
are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I've heard I've heard the meta stuff. I haven't really looked too much in deep into it. I mean, I have seen Player One, which I thought was a great movie just because I love movies and love escaping the world. I don't know if I'd want to escape the world on a regular basis and not be who I am, in some sort of universe that really doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Um, so the fact that I guess it would be this artificial world, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it won't. And as if I remember correctly, in Ready Player One, yeah, the Oasis is amazing. You could be anything you want, but you still had to come back home, you know. And I think you got to learn to be your authentic self within the world that we have. And if you see something, you got to stand up for it. I mean, it's crappy that money and power and these corporations are dictating these kind of things, just basically what they want to create. I don't know what it's going to do for humanity. Is it going to make us more disconnected and let the problems that do exist not exist for ways to people to escape? You can't escape, man. You can't escape. You can't escape you. You're always going to be you. So you got to continue to look to be your authentic self, no matter how painful it is. You're not going to find solace in anything that the people in power really want to give us, because it's never in our best interest. Those are my thoughts basically on it. I mean, I have my own issues dealing with my own universe. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you know, they're certainly not going to help me. But within that madness, uh, you know, I'm just going to try to be myself. And we human beings, we adapt, we survive. We look at things and we do evolve. I just hope there's more of a personal evolution for people in the things that hurt them, and in things that they love to do. Like, we need more art, and there's tons of art out there, but people need to embrace their artistic side or their creative side or their passionate side, whatever it is. I'd rather see that than something dictated and to take my identity away, something that I'm just finally learning to be comfortable in. you know and hey, if I was ever in the metaverse, I'd still be black. You know what I mean? and I'd still like fried chicken. So well, that might be a good place to do it. Maybe I wouldn't have high blood pressure like I do now, but but at the same time, I'd still have to come back and deal with all those issues. So I don't know. I just try to be in the moment. It's now, only always. Whatever unfolds. There's some things that we can't control, and I'm just getting myself ready for my own war. And war is raw. You know what I mean? And I'm looking at myself in my wholeness. And I'm not trying to be meta, or I'm not trying to be new agey. I'm trying to really connect with who I am as a person and put that out there in my authentic self, because it wasn't always there. Like, sometimes, and funny you should say that. I just wrote a poem a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure where it is, or else I'd read it. I have a million notebooks. It's insane. But it was about sort of creating this person that I created to cope, within my own self. And what I learned during even the last couple of years is I couldn't live up to it. I couldn't live up to it. And it wasn't real, it wasn't authentic, because it wasn't really how I felt. And I spent so much time, building this character, and elements are parts of me, for sure, but not all. It was just able to cope. So, it sort of touches on that. I don't want to be anyone else because, you can't be. No world, no virtual world. You just got to find your path and to build someone that you can live up to. And a lot of it is being humble. A lot of it is holding yourself accountable for your own things and what you bring to the table, because sometimes it's not always everybody else, and we can't always be victims, although we all come from circumstances and different things happen to us that make us the way we are, and we learn to cope within those ways. But sooner or later, you sort of have to, this last couple of years has been a cocooning of sorts for a lot of people. And, metaphorically speaking, hopefully we become our butterflies, you know what I mean? And that's, and I'm learning that too. Like, the person who I thought I was isn't that. And I'm something else, but it's good because it carries all those things that I was afraid to carry, and all those things I was afraid to face, and all those things I suppressed. I always thought, oh man, sometimes I got low and I was like, oh, it's depression. But no, it was more suppression. I was suppressing a lot of the things that I felt. So to let those things come up and me get in touch with them and going, oh, this is why I am the way that I am, but I can see it and it's no one else's fault, because like I can look at, my family background, I can look at my parents, and we went through a long journey to get where we are today. But when I learned the lesson, when I learned the discovery of what I thought I lacked, they lacked it as well. So how could they, the similar things happened to them, and some things I didn't even know that changed my trajectory in what I saw. And therefore I created those elements based on what I saw, and it wasn't their fault. And then in their turn, me seeing that it wasn't their fault, I was like, oh, it's not my fault. And then I was able to give up the blame. And then, I was able to sort of face those things, and I'm still going through them today. I'm not ashamed. And, I cry. I try not to get angry, and I don't really, I get in touch with my emotions, and I'm no longer afraid to be who I am compared to what I thought I was,
That's beautiful. And thank you for that. Couple things that came into my mind while you were talking was, I've always lived by this quote that it doesn't matter what happens to the being, it's what the being does once it happens to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people have heard that in a pretty popular TV show, but guys, they got it from me, but we won't get into that. Another quote that I think is relevant to that is, I think it was a voluntary quote. I might be wrong, but it doesn't matter where you go, there you are.
Yeah, it's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, if we don't deal with ourselves, then we're not going to be able to deal with our environment. We're not going to be able to deal with other people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what we don't like about other people, Carl Jung told us that they're aspects of ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is true more often than it's not. That if you find you're annoyed by someone else's behavior, it's because your behavior actually does mirror that in some way. And that's like, an unfortunate truth. But before I let you go, because I've kept you for a while, but just in general, like, you're a almost 50-year-old man. You're almost at that halfway to 100 point. There's a lot of younger people who will be watching this. So what would you say to like a younger person who came to you advice right now about the world just in general? I know that's pretty fucking vague and open, but I think you can handle it.
Yeah. Well, as cliche as it sounds, learn to get to know yourself. Learn to find your worth and who you are. Get good friends that are, like-minded. I've been fortunate to have lifelong friends. Derek, who I do the podcast with, we've known each other since, we were 8 years old. He's the same age as I am. Last week, we were a buddy, Chad. He came here. He was here on work, and we met up with him. He was out near the airport, and so we went out and met him and had some dinner and just laughed and giggled and was like, wow, after all these years. And I'd known Chad since, I was 5. So it was like after all these years, it was just still the same. And that's truth too. You got to watch who is in your circle. And it's not, sometimes we do have those moments when we see something in someone else and it's usually ourselves, but it's also, you can't be a people pleaser, because sometimes we invite people into our life who aren't good for us because we people please. And once you're a people pleaser, you're not in touch with who you are. You think you're lacking because you think by giving something to someone else, you'll get some great affirmation from it. Be your authentic self, believe in yourself, find your worth. Don't fill voids. Don't walk with crutches. Let yourself feel what you need to feel. We all come from different walks of life. We all have different ways that we were, brought up, and that we all have different things that affect us. Let those things affect you. Let that be the lesson that can take you to another higher plateau. And, just try to find something that you love to do, whether it makes you money or it doesn't. Find something that is your authentic voice that you can put. It's your world and only your world, and you can choose to share it if you want, or you can keep it all to yourself. But have that place that you can go and escape. Use your imagination, but mainly just do what you feel, but feel what you do. You know what I mean? I hope that makes sense. I don't know. I've noticed a few times I've been rambling, but
No, there's no rambling on this channel. This is all beautiful.
Yeah,
it's all beautiful.
Just do what you feel, but feel what you do. Oh, and keep it real, keep it right, keep it loose, but keep it tight.
Oh, well done. Well done.
Yeah, that's about it, man.
Tell people where they can find you.
Well, I mean, I'm at Spoken Flow on the gram. You can also find our podcast Down Home on the gram as well. We have another exciting, we're about to launch some new episodes in February during Black History Month. The first season was just learning this, well, it wasn't even a season. We're just going to continue. In this season, we're trying to go, I said it again. This time we're trying to go a little bit deeper, and we have some good guests talking about racial trauma. Some good musicians are on there. Just people telling their stories and how they were able to overcome, their trials and tribulations and be their authentic self. And, that's about it. So Down Home on IG, Spoken Flow on IG. And that's really about it. And I got some a music project I'm going to be launching in the new year. So, I'll definitely put it on those platforms. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm a fan of your podcast. It's got like a nice homey feeling. Like, I know it's called Down Home. Maybe that leads to it, but It's got a good homey feeling, like you can tell that both of you are very fucking authentic, and that resonates. So, keep it up. I'm looking forward to new episodes of that. Yep. Love all that you do. Love you, man. Thank you very much.
Love you too, man. Thanks for having. And I just want to say, man, keep doing what you're doing. And it never hurts to have these conversations. You're already doing it, so you already know it. But just keep doing that. The world needs more things like this, where people can just speak about who they are, what's on their mind, and say what they feel. That's what connection's about. That's what humanity is about. And I hope we can always keep. Elevate the mental is what I like to say. Elevate the mental.
It. Yeah, I like it. All right,
thanks, man.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody at home.
Thank you, everybody.